All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Monday, April 22nd. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton, big horror movie opened this weekend, and there's word out there from people like Matt Maloney that horror is dead. And you know what? We had to bring him in. We had to bring in our chief horror correspondent, the host of the New Flesh podcast, the man who knows whether horror is alive or not. So here he is from the New Flesh. Brett Arnold is here. Brett, thank you for coming on the BO Boys.
No problem. I already take issue with the fact that you called this a big horror movie. I don't know if that will hold up to scrutiny and once we do this Monday morning plow.
I mean, let's get into it because yeah, it didn't live up to what I just said there. So we're gonna see. Because Clayton, could you give us a plow for the box office weekend of Friday, April 19th?
Number one, Snivel War made $11.1 million in its second weekend, down 56%. It added 91 theaters. It's at $44.8 million. Number two, Abigail made $10.2 million in its first frame. Number three, Godzilla X Kong, the collab, made $9.4 million, down 39%. It lost 189 theaters. It's at $171.6 million in its fourth weekend. Number four, Newbie, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, made $9 million in its first frame. And number five, Crunchyroll, Spy X Family Code White, another collab, made $4.8 million in its first frame, but that was only in 2,000 theaters.
So Clayton, we didn't have a weekend preview episode last week because, of course, we had Jeff Bach, Exhibit Relations Co. on, and we did a summer movie preview episode. So if you haven't listened to that, it's a almost triple issue episode. It was over 2 hours, massive episode. Go through all the summer movies. So listen to that. But we didn't
Pat,
preview
people
this
are
week.
still listening to that from last. I mean, they're still listening. They're not done
Oh,
yet.
yes, yeah. People started when we dropped on Thursday. They haven't gotten through it yet.
I have these headphones on because I'm still listening to it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is the best way to podcast on any show, is to listen to the previous episode while you're trying to talk in the new one. Yeah, no, this is
It's
ideal.
not hard at all. I'm having a very easy time doing it, actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're definitely not going insane
Mm-mm.
as you listen to Jeff Bach in only one ear. So we didn't do the preview, but I'll say it. A couple episodes ago, and I think it was the results episode last weekend, we got Kirk Minahan on, and I talked about Civil War and how it overperformed my $9 million prediction for the opening weekend. I said this would drop like a stone. I called a Morbius drop. I said 68% or higher drop.
Wow.
And it didn't do that, guys. It didn't do that. I mean,
Should I call Bill Skarsgård in? Because it sounds like you're about to eat some crow.
Wow, the star of the crow. And that, I mean, speaking of summer
I had to
preview,
update the reference for modern
Yes.
crow.
he is officially the new Crow. Brandon Lee, despite dying for the role, is not who you think of as the Crow anymore. You think of
Sorry, Eddie Furlong will always be my crow. Thank you so much.
Oh man, Wicked
so-
Prayer, is that what that one is? Yeah, okay. Tara Reid is
know it.
my crow co-lead.
Yes. Yes.
Not my Crow co-lead. Hashtag not my Crow co-lead. So
Crow lead.
Crow lead.
My
Hashtag
crow lead,
not
yeah.
my Crow lead. Civil War, guys. I predicted a Morbius second weekend, and it only dropped 56%, made 11 million. It's up to 44.8. Will I eat crow? No, of course I'm not going to eat crow. But I will say that people like this movie, I guess. I mean, the cinema score didn't seem like they did, B-, but they're
I don't know
going.
I don't know if it's a necessarily everyone likes it thing. It's just more of it's become like the movie of the moment. It's become a zeitgeisty conversation starter where people are like, "Have you seen Civil War? What did you think?" It's very divisive. I think A24 did a bang up job.
Mhm.
I didn't love the movie either, but I think it's interesting and they did a bang up job more with the marketing than with the movie. Like they really sold this movie as something that people want to see, it's spectacle. I think
Yep.
it was Mendelsohn who said it's like she's calling it a horror movie, and like it's hard to argue that in terms of like it's an upsetting movie that people are having a viscerally hard time watching, And yeah, maybe it is kind of like a horror movie. And in terms of that, if that's a horror movie second weekend drop, that's a good second weekend drop, 56%.
And I love that Mendelsohn made that distinction in that, yes, it's not a horror movie, it's a war movie, but it's getting the zeitgeistiness that a poppy horror movie gets. It's getting the holds despite the low audience scores, because horror movies sometimes get those very low cinema scores because people are just
Yeah.
so taken aback at what they see on screen. And you know what? It's good for horror that Mendelsohn is chalking Civil War up as horror, because horror could use it right now.
Yeah, we got to bump up those numbers because we
So
got the Matt Mortadellas of the world trying to tell us that horror is flailing at the box office,
yeah,
which
Mortadella and Slaw, yeah.
yeah, I mean, citation needed. That was the funniest thing on earth, is that the baloney piece talking about, like, why aren't there less theaters? Why aren't we consolidating screens? Because they aren't all doing well, which is like
Mhm.
maybe a fair point to make. But in the article, there's just like a tossed off line where he said, I have to pull it up, I think, but he basically said,
And of course, you're talking about Matt Baloney's article in Suck News.
Mhm.
yeah, Matt
Yeah.
Mortadella, Suck News. He had just if you search the word horror, if you control F horror, it's mentioned one time, and it goes, consumer habits have clearly changed since COVID, and one genre after another is becoming less quote unquote theatrical, with large format screens taking a bigger and bigger chunk of the receipts. The latest horror titles are struggling, a truly horrific development for the business. What is he What is he talking
Yeah.
about? Because I look at the chart, I'm looking at the numbers.com. There's like a fun little chart that they do that's like the box office share of like horror and how much of the box office share per year it is. Right now, 2024, mid-April, it's 4.4%, 4.48% of the box office receipts are horror movies,
Okay.
which like I feel like that's pretty good for not even halfway through the year. But anyway,
And for not including October, because that bumps way up once we get to
100%, it's going to
September
go
and
way up.
October. Yeah.
And if you look at the what's in that chart of, there's they call 14 movies that have come out. A couple are like really non-existent, but for the most part, there's like at least seven of them that I think are real. But like Imaginary is a movie that maybe no one really liked or anything, but it made $35 million, and I guarantee you it was a Blumhouse Lionsgate. It cost like probably under 10 or something. So that movie was profitable. The First Omen is arguably a good example of one that underperformed, but the article came before that came out, I think. So it couldn't have been talking about that. And that movie was a Hulu original that tested well, that became a theatrical release, that is getting critical praise that I don't think the studio must have not have expected based on the really late date for the screening and the embargo and all that stuff. It just seemed like Disney or 20th Century did not know what they had in The First Omen, and that like it was a really good horror movie that if they put more of a marketing spend behind, or like one of those crazy ad campaigns where you show how scared the audience was and get audiences talking, they could have zeitgeisted this movie, and it didn't even make an opportunity, didn't even make a chance at it. So I do think First Omen is arguably underperforming for what it is, but it's also a $30 million movie that has made 45 worldwide already. So I just don't understand these arguments. Immaculate, sure, it's a Neon movie that only made 15, but it's Neon's highest grossing movie by far. It was a very cheap movie. It's already made 20. So if you're talking about like profit margins and budgets, you have to be conscious of all those things, because I guess on paper you could say, yeah, Immaculate, Late Night with the Devil, First Omen, these are Imaginary. They're all not making a lot of money, but relative to what they cost, they're all profitable. And Late Night with the Devil and Immaculate are like garnering headlines for their record-breaking runs for Neon and for IFC Films, respectively. So horror is having a moment, if any, like it always has. It is still the most dependable thing at the box office, and I think it's great that Scott Mendelsohn on Suck News wrote basically a "fuck you, Matt Mortadella" piece that was like, Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire worked because they positioned it as a horror movie and not as a comedy, and horror movies are the only safe bet in the market. So
Now, what is your take on, because
First of all, though, we just gotta applaud the rants. That was the outstanding defense of horror.
That
Hashtag
was
horror lifestyle. Hashtag horror always wins. So
thank you
thank
so
you, Brett.
much.
This is why you're
Yes.
here.
amazing defense, and But what is your take on? I think there was one thing that did resonate with me, and not that I want to stick up for Mappaloni at all, because he came on our show and yelled at me on our show.
Did he
On
really?
our show, he yelled
On
at me.
our
Yes,
show.
he yelled at me on our show about
On our
Pixar. He
show
yelled at me
about
on our
Pixar.
show.
On
We
our
didn't go on
show.
his show and he yelled at us. He yelled at me on our show.
Yeah,
So
because Clayton dared say that Pixar was declining and creatively bankrupt, and he said this 2 years ago before Lightyear even came out. So Clayton was
Mhm.
ahead of the game,
Mm.
yeah.
and got yelled
Baloney
at
took
on
took
our show.
umbrage, took issue.
He
Yeah.
took issue. The one thing, and I'll say about Snivel War, is that it's doing really well because of IMAX. Like, IMAX is really a power that is driving this movie, because they really pushed that this is an A24 on IMAX. The Alex Garland factor. There are other factors that drew some people in, but I do think the fact that this is an IMAX movie and it retained most of the IMAXs this week made people see this over something like Abigail. What is your take with that? Because we are big IMAX proponents. We do think that there should be more IMAX screens. We think schools and churches should be plowed over and IMAXs should be replacing them.
100%,
Um,
100%.
Yeah.
And we're not political, huh? But
huh?
Huh.
the presidential candidate that makes that part of their platform gets the BO Boys endorsement.
Well,
Doesn't
that
matter
is for
who.
sure.
that's
Doesn't
good,
matter
and that
who.
goes with my plan that this was back when MoviePass was thriving and, like, the government and like, COVID was happening, and it felt like the way to stimulate the economy is to nationalize MoviePass and give it to every citizen
Yes.
of America,
Mhm.
and,
Yes, movie pass
it's
for all. Yes.
MoviePass for all. Yeah.
Yep.
We were
I
we were,
love
like,
it.
one vote away at one point years ago, but fucking Joe
Yeah.
Lieberman or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
So
Yep.
what is your take
Abigail,
now on, well, what is your
or
take though on the IMAX being such a huge part of the business now? Does horror stand a chance when it comes to IMAX? Because a lot of these are low budget movies.
yeah, yeah.
You know, will they look great on an IMAX screen? Will they be IMAX ready?
Right. Well, I mean, I saw Spiral from the Book of Saw in real IMAX, and that movie did
Wow.
not really need it or feel like it was ready for the big screen like
Uh-huh.
that. So
Mhm.
I don't know if they care that much about what it actually looks
But
like
what
versus
about
just, like,
Saw
put it
X
in there.
on IMAX?
I don't think that happened. Maybe I'm
It
wrong. I
didn't
think it was
happen.
yeah, I don't think that happened. I think look, I think it's great that IMAX and large format screens have become like such a huge part of the box office story right now. I think it shows that theatrical is a business that works, that people are interested in when it's worthy of going to, and when there's something worthy of spectacle that is going to look better on that huge screen than it does at your house. Dune 2 is a great example. Dune 2 looks so good. And I know that movie wasn't even shot on film, and they put it on film. They put a digitally shot movie on 70 millimeter and called it a event in IMAX, and it's huge, and people go
Right.
see it. So, like, I don't think the technical aspects matter that much. It's just like the signal of a movie being an IMAX is that it's a spectacle and it will look better than it does at your house, and people are really driving with that. It shows that they want to see something like that, and I think it's like a great um boon for theatrical. And you're totally right, they should plow down churches, orphanages, schools,
Yes. We didn't even
health,
think orphanages, but that's a great idea.
Well,
urgent
when's the last time you
cares,
met an orphan?
hospitals.
When's the last time you
Yeah.
met an orphan?
Yeah, so long.
Little Esther, an orphan first kill a couple summers ago. That's the last orphan I
Oh,
saw.
that's the
Of
last one.
Which
course, if it's a
don't even
horror
get me
movie
started.
setting, you leave it
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Don't get me started on that movie not being in theaters when it would have been a huge hit. A
Yes.
decade, many years later, sequel to a box office hit with the person returning, and the movie's actually good, and critics like it, and they shunted it off to fucking Paramount Plus or whatever it was.
It's Paramount Plus,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
Truly unbelievable. But yeah, you put Orphan in IMAX, it would have made a lot of money. And I think IMAX is great for theatrical, great for the genre. I hope that more horror filmmakers start going big in that way. Get Nolan on the line and ask him how you can shoot with your IMAX cameras and stuff like that. You gotta. I think the horror genre has to lean into it in the like pre-production, or in the shooting
Yes.
phase, more
Yes.
so than the like let's just put it in IMAX belatedly phase. I guess.
At this point, because these horror movie budgets still have to be kept very low, but IMAX has been around long enough that there have to be used IMAX cameras that you could send to Blumhouse. You're not going to use the ones Nolan's using on his next Great Man movie, but send him the one he used 15 years ago, and let Blumhouse use those to make IMAX movies. Also, what about some horror specific PLFs? This was a trend in the
Whoa.
50s
Yeah,
of
like
your sort of
castle
smell-o-vision type
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I do think this is the time. They were ahead of their time back then, but this is the time that you need those gimmicks in theaters for horror films, so that you could have horror specific special,
Yeah.
higher ticket prices. You
You
need to
need
pour blood on people.
the ambulance waiting outside for the audience
Mhm.
members. The spectacle.
Yes, yes, yes. You pay $23 for your ticket, and we'll have an ambulance with its lights on outside the theater.
Well, they
I
spray
love it.
in 40X, they spray water in your face, so why don't they spray blood?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need to go there because I haven't seen a movie in 40X, and every time people act like they just came back from war after they go to one of those things. And
Mhm.
I genuinely think I joke that they should put Civil War in there, but apparently they did, and apparently it's just like a lot to take because that movie has some of the loudest gun pops and
Mhm.
like fighter jets overhead stuff I've ever heard. And I can't imagine in 40X. People are probably walking away shaken.
Mhm.
I mean, back to Civil War overperforming as it has, is this a huge victory for sound? Because that has been one of the big talking points of this movie, just how loud the gunfire is, how loud the movie is. And, coming off of a year where Zone of Interest basically got a Best Picture nomination largely due to the sound in the movie, is sound having a moment? And is that also then, as we look ahead to the summer, a great sign for A Quiet Place day one? Because people are just very into sound, and sound could be making up like 30% of Civil War's box office right now.
Now I'm concerned that with the ebbs and flows of Hollywood, that because sound is popping, that we're going to go back to the silent era next. It's going to be all silent movies.
Oh wow. I mean, I think hopefully Hollywood looks at this and says people want more sound. They want more constant sound.
Well, I
And
actually
that
think
we're not going to get a sequel to The Artist, because that's what I fear the most in life.
this is a perfect
Mhm.
segue into Abigail. I don't want to push it or force it or
No,
anything.
let's do it. We got
It's
to talk about this
just
movie.
this movie couldn't be more of a talkie. Like they
Uh-huh.
transitioned from silent movies to talkies at some point, and this movie really took it to heart because it's just 2 hours. It's wall to wall talking. People are just talking about what's going on and what they think's going on and who the antagonist could be and
Mhm.
why are we here. It's just people talking in circles. I really did not like this movie,
Okay.
but I know you did. So
I did. I saw it on Friday night, and to be fair,
you were in the mood for conversation.
I was in the mood for conversation. Well, I was in the mood for just really in the mood for a movie. My wife, she's out of town. She's doing what she does. I don't know what she does, but she's out there doing it. And I have the place to myself this weekend. So I took myself on a little Friday night movie date, local dine-in theater, and I texted you, Brett, because listen, this isn't just a on camera on podcast relationship. We're text buddies, and I texted
Yes.
you, should I see Abigail or Monkey Man? And you said you couldn't
Yeah,
recommend either.
I said
And so
neither.
I
That was
chose
not
I
helpful.
chose horror, and I was very excited. So I went in there with a lot of positivity. I had a good time. I enjoyed how much the crew was yapping. So,
But you
just
do agree they were yapping.
they were yapping a lot. Yeah. So I mean, this movie is of course a crew. They kidnap a child for money. Child turns out to be something they didn't expect. Now,
Let
a
yeah.
spoiler alert, I guess. Let's,
Yes.
Brett, I remember when you covered long in pre-production the announcement of this film. What was the original title of the film, Abigail? And
The
again, if you
original
haven't
yeah.
seen it, we're about to say what the original title of Abigail was.
This is like the only way to talk about Abigail, in my
Yeah,
opinion, is
yeah,
because it's a fascinating prospect of a movie that knowing the working title of it kind of ruins the alleged twist of it. And the
yeah,
working title was Dracula's Daughter.
yeah.
which is an original, old Universal horror movie sequel to Dracula. But it turns out that the radio silence version has nothing to do with that. It was just like a title inspiration that led to this movie that we see now called Abigail. And it's another case where, like, not only does that title Dracula's daughter literally just give away the whole thing, Abigail as a title plus a poster with a little girl with blood on her face or whatever also kind of implies and gives away what it is. And the problem with that, and why we're harping on it, is because the movie spends, I'm going to say, a solid 45 minutes setting up what the story to the point where the movie doesn't let you know that Abigail is, spoiler alert, Dracula's daughter, so to speak. It doesn't let you know that until 45 minutes in, but you as an audience member know that. So you're watching these fucking characters just talk while you know what's going on. And it drove me insane. And then once the movie actually kicked in, it just didn't deliver enough for me as like, okay, well, now I'm watching the Dracula's daughter movie. They know she's picking them off one by one. It just felt so boring and weirdly way similar to Ready or Not, which is a movie that they made 10 years ago.
It was very similar to Ready or Not. I think you said on one of your podcasts that they may have used the same mansion to film.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that they did. So, yeah, I didn't love it. And, it didn't do very well at the box office, and nor did the last attempt at Dracula, which was Last Voyage of the Demeter, and nor did the one before that, a couple months before that, in Renfield. So, like, I think it's maybe Matt Belloni should fire up the typewriter and get a piece going on Dracula being dead and Hollywood loving it or whatever. Because
he would say Dracula's dead and I'm loving it. That would be Matt Belloni's because he hates horror.
Yeah.
He just loves Pixar.
I feel like there is something to be said about Universal kind of flailing around with their monster stuff, but I don't think it speaks to the genre as a whole. And the movie costs probably, like, I think it was $28 or $30 million. So it made 10 this weekend in America. If you look at, I haven't looked at the international, but it's got another 5 international. It's already halfway to its budget. I don't think this is a hit by any means. It may squeak out enough to break even, but I do think there's like a look in the mirror moment for Universal more so than like anybody else, where it's like, hey, what are we doing with our stable of iconic monster characters other than beating Dracula into the fucking ground by doing 3 different versions of it in quick succession, and none of them really did well.
Well, I mean, can we, and Clayton, I'll toss to you, can we put this at the feet of Drac? Because is Dracula as an IP, as an icon, as a movie star? And Dracula's not in Abigail. He's not, even though that was the working title. But vampires, are vampires dead? Do, as Seltzer and Friedberg once said, do vampires suck? And Clayton, let me get your thoughts. You haven't seen Abigail, but where are you at on the BO power of vampires right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's at a very low point right now. My thing that I talked about last time when you were on the show and we were talking about The Last Voyage was there was an argument that if it was, Dracula's boat or the boat Dracula was on or something like that, there would have been higher box office. And I disagreed because I do think Dracula is dead. And I'm not loving it as much as people think I love when things bomb and don't do well. That's not true.
This is a show about
Dracula
hating movies and box office, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We hate everything. We want everything to fail because then we wouldn't have a show because all the theaters would be closed. So that's absolutely, if you're somebody who has that thought about us, then you're 100% correct.
Nailed it.
But so nailed it. So if this was called Dracula's Daughter, do you think it would have done any better?
That's a tough question because I'm trying to toy in my mind with the idea. I'm sure we talked about this with Renfield or Voyage of the Demeter, but like,
it's a great title.
Both of those movies, neither of them have Dracula in the title. And the selling point of Renfield was Nick Cage as Dracula, but it was clear that like the movie wasn't about him. So it just seems like these are just like goofy plays. And like, I appreciate that they're trying to, like, the dark universe, so to speak, the Mummy, the Tom Cruise, that was supposed to start a whole world of interconnected movies, Marvel style. That failed so badly, so immediately. They didn't even give it a chance to get off the ground. And then they went in the other direction with like, okay, what if we do like a tour driven, let a cool director do it, and then we got Lee Winnell's Invisible Man, big hit, people love it. So now their
Mhm.
strategy seems to be, well, no Dark Universe, but what if Lee Winnell just directs every single one of these? Because now he's doing The Wolfman
Yeah.
with Chris Abbott. Um,
Chris
and
Abbott,
that's an
interesting.
interesting, like, so that to me feels like that's their Universal monster play. But at the same time, you have to consider what they're doing here. These are Universal monster plays. These are them
Right.
using this Abigail really doesn't use Dracula at all. They don't
No,
say the
no.
word Dracula, but arguably he appears in the movie, depending on how you treat your vampire lore or whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know what the actual effect, if there was just a pure Dracula movie called Dracula and it looked good, like how would that do? I don't think Dracula itself is the problem. I think it's Universal not knowing what to do with their stable beyond their Lee Winnell verse. So they're like, it sounds so cool on paper. Like, yeah, let's do like 3 different Dracula movies. One's a comedy with Nicolas Cage and really great makeup. The other one is like people getting picked off. It's all on the boat. Sounds like a fun concept on paper. And this one is, what if Dracula's daughter was a little girl and she was kidnapped and she danced like Megan the doll? That's
It
essentially
it
the
it,
plot.
it all sounds airtight when you just think of them as log lines. But why
Yes.
did this? And again, this failed in the sense that you would expect it to have done 15 to 20,
You
and
expect
it
it to
only
beat
did
Civil
10.
War in its second
You
week
expect,
for sure.
yeah. So
Mhm.
definitely this underperformed, but I do question why this happened here and whether it was people knew the twist enough from the marketing and then weren't interested, or if the movie needed to be very upfront. And we may see this if we see any commercials for this movie in the next week. They may fully
The
lean
pivot.
into
Yeah.
the pivot of she's a vampire from second one of all the advertising, and they're
Yeah.
telling you come see little girl vampire movie, because
Yeah.
that is what this movie had, and the marketing hinted at it, or I guess showed you, but didn't really make it forefront. You will see vampire little girl work. I mean, it should have been called maybe Vampire Little Girl. You know,
Yeah.
it's a weird mix of giving away the twist, but not super selling the twist,
It's
as if
just it
Megan was
yeah.
promoted without, really
Yeah.
leaning into that a robot will murder.
It's just something about the disconnect between like the people who wrote this movie and the marketing team, I guess, because
Yeah,
it's like the person who wrote it seems to really luxuriate in the idea of the characters not knowing what's going on, and
yeah,
it's like a reveal. And I just can't imagine anyone going in at this point with the way it's been marketed not knowing. Like, maybe there's someone on Earth, we should just try to find to interview them, who went in and didn't know that Abigail was a little vampire girl and just thought it was a movie about a normal girl being kidnapped or whatever, but it's somehow for some reason called Abigail. I don't know. It's weird. It's a
yeah.
weird
Well,
situation.
well,
It's a weird situation for sure.
my big question coming out of this is the strength of Radio Silence as sort of a brand,
Mhm.
because they had Ready or Not, which was a sleeper hit.
Yeah.
Then they go off and they do these Scream movies that did Bafa Bobo, and this is the movie they did instead of doing Seven,
Big mistake.
and it's nobody cares. Like, this reunites them with the lead of their Scream movies, Melissa Barrera,
Mhm.
and nobody cares. Like, I think that's a bigger thing, is that you would expect the Radio Silence group to be popping off with their originals now, and it felt like this fell right through the cracks,
Yeah.
and nobody was excited, and it's like all the momentum they had built is where is it?
That's a good point. I think mainstream audiences just don't pay attention to that shit. Like, I don't think most normal moviegoers are like, "Hey, it's Radio Silence, the guys who directed the last 2 Scream movies." I think they're just like,
Mhm.
"Vampire girl on poster, I'm in or I'm out."
Right,
And
Yeah.
right.
that's so interesting to me because it is. I'm fascinated by that idea and how horror fans are um treating Radio Silence
Yeah,
because
to
Well,
the
yeah,
degree
go
that
ahead.
mainstream audiences think of those last Scream movies, they probably still think Wes Craven directed those
Yeah,
last
they
2.
probably don't know that he's dead. They're
Yeah,
unaware.
yeah, it wasn't in the movie, so it's not canon. Yeah,
rest in peace.
They probably
But,
think like
yeah,
Chat GPT put it together. They don't fucking know.
they don't know. They don't know.
but when you look at something like Raka Raka, who I mean, I think they're a name, and I think there's people waiting for their next thing, where Radio Silence should be at that level or higher because of their success.
Yeah,
I
I
just,
guess that's
you know?
interesting. I think yeah, I think it's maybe because of like the Universal Pictures versus was it A24 of it
A24,
all?
yeah.
Yeah, like there's like an auteur driven narrative at A24 that like their fans are like aboard. Like they understand that like there are directors who make movies and you want to follow them to their next one. But like the people who are going to see Scream largely are there for the spectacle of the franchise IP or whatever, the horror movie.
Right.
And yeah, Abigail wasn't enough of a hook. Like, what if there was a little girl who was a ballerina? Is kind of like the poster, and there's definitely some vague horror vibes. But yeah, I don't know. I just think the marketing. It seems like it was either like if you saw the trailer, it gave away too much, or if you saw the poster, it was too vague, but also kind of gives it away by just showing the little girl in the focal point. I don't know. It's
I
very. I don't know what
yeah.
you're supposed to do with this movie. That's kind of my point with it. It was like I watched it and I'm like, who is that for? What is it? Like it just kind of is like a fun little vampire romp, but it doesn't do it. It doesn't. The things that I
It's a
found
movie
interesting
that
about it.
really works
Yeah.
well as a screenplay, honestly, and you talk
Yeah.
about the yapping, it's probably best form as a screenplay, even though I did like the movie.
Yeah.
It should
I
have been a
just
play. It should have been a play.
a
It
Just
ballet.
should have
be
been a play.
just be a play. But, so Abigail and Dracula's daughter, they sort of fall into what I refer to as the Brightburn situation,
Mm,
where Brightburn was a movie
baby
that
Superman.
was, what if Superman was evil? What if he came and he was evil? Great concept, right? Somebody pitches that to you, you say, "Write that script." And then the screenwriters sit down and say, what the fuck? Where do we go from there? I mean, it seems like a slam dunk idea, but there's really no place to go with it, and we know that from Brightburn. And I think, Pat, from what you're saying is that they did a really great job with what they had, but it is a Brightburn situation where it is you have Dracula's daughter, but then really where can you go with it for a mainstream audience, you know?
Right, right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
and
movie that has nowhere to go because like it's teasing its setup and then it reveals its setup and then it doesn't really it arguably I guess for some people is delivering on its setup, but like once it started doing the ready or not blood exploding thing, I was just like, is the joke that they're just doing the same thing? Are they like fucking with me? Like I just couldn't
mhm.
believe what I was watching. Like it's like, whoa, here's our staple. In the third act, this happens. Like it's just
Yeah.
such a weird choice.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, you love us, audience. You love Radio Silence. Well, this cast, I mean, I think the two female leads of this cast, this was an interesting moment for them because Melissa Barrera is coming off of the Scream movies that were hits, but also the controversy that led to her wrongly getting fired from the next Scream movie and that not happening. So this would have been a good chance for this to overperform and really cement her as a horror star, quote unquote star. And then
Scream
you got
Queen,
Catherine,
Final Girl.
a Scream Queen, of course. And then you got Catherine Newton coming off Elisa Frankenstein. She's someone
She's
that
great in
Hollywood,
this.
she's great in this. Yeah. And she's someone who Hollywood obviously wants to make happen. She was Quantumania, they sort of retrofit that part so that she would be the lead of Quantumania. That's a huge bomb. Lisa Frankenstein, big star part, that bombs. Okay, now she's going to be a Scream Queen in a horror movie from Radio Silence. This is not doing well. So I would have hoped that those two stars would have had a little juice, in the horror level at the box office, and that didn't happen. So, I mean, do we think any of this is pinned on them? Is this a bump in the road for either of them, or is this set them back? Like, where do you see the part that the cast played in this weekend?
Well, I just want to say that I do think the cast is really good in the movie, and it's not their fault that it's bad. It's like really a
Thank
script
you.
problem. I thought they were really Catherine Newton, especially Kevin Durant, the guy who looks like Buff Elon Musk, is really funny,
Oh,
even though his
he's great.
character's very annoying. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna like put a damper on Catherine Newton's star power, but like you're right, where I mean, what star power, right? Because like the
Right.
biggest hit she has probably I still call her the Detective Pikachu girl because that must have been the biggest movie that she was in.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how it's gonna affect their careers. I hope that it doesn't. Well, Melissa Barrera's career is already an interesting moment of like she got fired off a Scream movie for tweeting about Gaza.
Mhm.
And it's like, is that going to be like a Hollywood blacklist thing? Is she not going to be in stuff because of that? We haven't seen yet because this movie was already shot a while back.
Mhm.
So this doesn't really count. So I'm interested to see that. But like, you're right that, I mean, if you look at Catherine Newton's, movies that are real movies in theaters, I guess Blockers was a big movie,
Yep.
and Detective Pikachu was a big movie, but Freaky was bad timing, COVID, sure, but it did not do well. And then Lisa Frankenstein did not do well, and now Abigail did not do well. So you're right. It does seem like there's a trajectory there, but like that's something that's good about the genre is like if she wants to just do horror, she can continue to do horror and they will be glad to have her. I just
Oh,
don't know
100%.
where she goes beyond that. If maybe studios are like, she's a scream queen. We don't treat her seriously. But I don't know. All she is like one Brie Larson in Room performance away from breaking through to bigger stuff, I think.
Yeah,
So
it's
Yeah.
because the things that you hear about the movies she's been in, other than Quantum Mania, I don't think I've heard anything about her performance in that. But like, Lisa Frankenstein is a movie that I really wanted to like and tried to watch, and I couldn't get through it. But she was really good in it. Abigail, she was really good in it. Freaky, she was really good in it. So I mean, as much as these movies are not doing well, at the very least, what you hear is that she's good in them. So there is
yeah,
hope that she could get either in a very great horror movie or in another genre film, well, a film of another genre
yeah,
that she really shows her acting chops in. So I mean, I think there is hope there. Melissa, it's like this, it would be great if this was a hit, to really be like, okay, well, no matter what, she might be bankable. So because at the end of the day, when it comes to Hollywood, it's like, will you make me money or not? So if this movie would have overperformed, that would have been great for her because Hollywood would have said, well, you're making money, so we'll cast you. You know what I
Right.
mean?
If
It's a
Johnny
bit
Depp was still making hits, he'd still be the lead in movies today.
well, we
Yeah.
have to see how
exactly.
Gian du Barry does when it opens here in a month or two, which
That
apparently is happening.
we'll be following that box office closely. So you have an important business call minutes away. So we know your time is limited, Brett.
Yes.
Just in the next minute, give us some what is on the horizon for horror in terms of what you are excited about and what could reverse the curse, for the Matt Baloney's of the world at the box office for horror. Is there anything early summer? I mean, we talked about Strangers is a May movie. Is there anything that you think could pop at the box office?
I'm hoping that Strangers does do well. I don't think that there's enough awareness right now that there's a Strangers trilogy coming out, and it's nuts because I would have said Strangers 1's going to pop, but it's less than a month away, and I haven't seen a lick of marketing about it or any awareness whatsoever. So I'm hoping that comes through. Um, A24 has I Saw the TV Glow, which I don't think will be a hit or
Mm.
anything, but it's a really cool specialty movie that I really enjoyed. And the people who connect with that movie are going to love it. And I think it's really special and I think it's important. And I'm fascinated to see how a movie of that size will do with a bunch of hype, but it is going to be like, under 15 total for sure, I feel like. What else is on the horizon beyond Strangers in May? Let me look to
Well,
the
you've
summer.
got Alien Romulus this summer. You've got Trap, if we're going to count that as horror.
Oh,
I mean,
I
M.
couldn't be
Night is
more
his own
excited
thing.
for M. Night's Trap. Definitely my most anticipated
Trap.
of the year. And then his
Yeah.
daughter's movie, The Watchers, I'm also very
Right.
interested in. Um,
Mhm.
I'm very excited about Maxine, despite not caring a lot about Pearl. I think it's really the quickness between X and Pearl is making this normal distance between Pearl and Maxine feel insane. Like they had to
Uh-huh.
Yes.
shoot the movie first. So we're all like, "Where is it? Come on!"
I
And they
know.
had to shoot the whole thing because it wasn't shot yet, like the other one. But yeah, the ones you mentioned, like I'm excited for those. I'm excited for Alien. I'm really hopeful that it's good. I really like the Fede Alvarez produced Texas Chainsaw Massacre that Netflix made that nobody liked. So I'm hoping that I like this one. The Crow. I'm hoping I just am hoping The Crow comes out based on
Mhm.
based on the decade plus, maybe 20 years of them saying this is happening with different leads, including Jason Momoa at one point and different directors. The movie's in the can, and yet they keep pushing it. They keep kicking the can down the road. So
Yep.
that's now in August. Excited for that, and I'm excited for Cuckoo, the neon Hunter Schafer movie that I've
Mhm.
heard is weird and interesting. That and Longlegs at Neon, which is the Oz
Nick
Perkins
Cage.
horror movie with Nick Cage. That is definitely
Mhm.
and Micah Monroe. These are all highly anticipated movies by me. And of course, I think, based on what Mendelsohn was saying, they sell Beetlejuice 2 as a horror friendly thing and not a kiddie comedy. It's gonna crush. It's gonna crush anyway. But I
Yes.
Mhm.
think Beetlejuice 2 is gonna do very well. I hope the Speak No Evil reboot is good and does well. But yeah, that's kind of all I got going
I
on.
saw the trailer for that. I'm very curious to see how Americans will react and if it's going to be the same as the original and go as hard. Because if it does, then people are gonna come out of that theater being like, "What did I watch?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes hard. The original goes hard. Will the
Yeah.
American go hard? I mean, based on remakes of movies like Inside and Martyrs,
Probably
probably
not.
not as hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
probably
Probably not.
not as hard.
Yeah.
All right, so this guy has got to go. Important business call. Everyone, of course, listen to the New Flesh. Listen to Roger and me, Roger and Ebert tribute podcast. Anything else you want to say to the listeners, Brett?
No, you guys are the best. It's always a pleasure to be here. I'm sad I don't get to end with the "I'll see you." I'll leave
Right.
that to you guys.
But you
Yeah.
pretty much nailed it there. All right.
Yeah.
Get to your important business call. Brett of
All
the New
right.
Flesh. Clayton and I will round this out here as
Thank you,
Brett waves
Brett.
off. And of course, the YouTube watchers saw Brett do that, which is the reason why you have to watch the BO Boys on YouTube. So, Clayton, let's get into the rest. Anything else of note or that we didn't get to in this top 10? I mean, we haven't said, other than you plowing, we have not said the words "the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare," maybe in the history of this podcast.
No, we
And
haven't.
that is a Guy Ritchie movie that
Mhm.
did open this weekend and did make, would it make 9 million? $9 million. So it's interesting because Guy Ritchie is now sort of his own genre of
Mhm.
movie. And they do all seem to make around $8 or $9 million opening weekend.
Yeah, when you look at The
Which I don't know if
Gentleman.
that's good for his budgets though, because I don't think he's making like uh Late Night with the Devil budgeted movies, but he is making that as his opening weekends.
Well, when you look at The Gentleman, which came out 2019, and this was, I think this was his, like, first sort of this type of movie after the success of Aladdin. He was able to make these sort of movies with decently low budgets. Like this, like Gentleman was 22. It opened at
Mhm.
10.
Yep.
I think that's a movie that now it has a Netflix show based on it,
Yes,
which
it
is
does. I'll never watch,
right.
but it exists. Yep.
Yeah. So he had that one, and then he had a few.
Well, he had
Where's
The
the
Covenant in basically 1 year ago, exactly,
that
April
I feel like, but that's
2023.
sort of a different beast because that was more of an awards play,
It was like a war drama,
action movie.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm talking like Wrath of Man, which is a movie that a Statham movie that came out in 2021. Of course, that has Statham, so that's a whole different ballgame than this because this had a big cast, but it didn't have somebody as big as Statham. That opened to 8.3, right, on a budget of, let's see, 40. Okay, so that's a pretty high budget, Wrath of Man,
Right.
but also came out in 2021, so we're grading on a curve there. The thing with Ungentlemanly, is that for some reason, people felt this was gonna be a breakout. This was gonna make way more than these other movies,
Mhm.
and it didn't. It underperformed. It was at the low end of what people thought this could do. And so, like, e how long will he continue to be able to make these sort of movies with them not really breaking out? Like, the
Right.
expectation is you make these movies for lower budgets, and then one of them pops, you know?
Right, right. Make 5 Guy Ritchie movies, one of them will be a big hit,
Yeah,
but
and
it's
it
none
looks
of
like
them are.
yeah, this is the one that sorta should have been it in people's minds, and then it didn't. And these movies are not, it's not like next weekend this thing is gonna drop, 14% and everybody's going to be psyched about it. I just
Right.
feel like it's gonna sort of go away and get
Right.
lost in some of the bigger movies that are coming down the pike. So, yeah, it's really interesting what's going on here with these movies.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he actors wanna work with him, which is always a huge way for a director to still get movies made, whether they're
Mhm.
doing great or not, is that studios will bet on the package and they'll bet on, "Okay, we've got these 3 actors who are all signed on." And I
Mhm.
guess in this case, though, the one who would have made that happen is the fact that they got Henry Cavill in it,
Cavill.
right? And it's like
Mhm.
Henry Golding's in this. I don't know how much he means at this point after the Snake Eyes movie.
Mhm.
Carrie
Alan
Ells is in it.
Richardson.
Alan Ritchson is the guy who, he's Reacher on the TV show, and he's obviously someone Hollywood wants to break out. And I think these
Mhm.
are all steps towards that. I don't think this movie bombing affects him in any
No.
way.
No,
He's
no, no.
someone who at some point they're going to find the big IP that he gets to remake and be the lead
Is
up.
he
And
is he Stretch Armstrong? Does he finally is he the one
right,
to
right.
crack Stretch Armstrong?
Right, right. So Alan Ritchson, I think in this movie, this is just like a building block for him. But Henry Cavill's the one who Hollywood still thinks means something at the box office, and
He
he's
does, yeah.
never meant anything other than being Superman. And even there, those aren't Superman movies that did crazy above the expectations.
But I'll say, of all the Supermen that there's been, he might be the one that has succeeded the most in the sense that he was in a Mission Impossible movie,
Yep.
you know, he's still getting a shot so far after Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
do think that the you know, the other Supermen have really been stigmatized by being Superman. It did not help that he went back to Superman. He really shouldn't have done that. I
But
understood the
that was
draw,
the Rock. That was
but
the
that
Rock
was The
got him in
Rock, and The
there.
Rock can
Yeah.
be very persuasive, I understand that, but
Yeah,
that I
not
think
everyone
was
is Cody who could turn down The Rock's offers. Henry Cavill
exactly.
wasn't able to finish the story. He's not like Cody, but he listened to The
Yeah,
Rock. Yeah.
but I mean, as a Superman actor, he is, I think, probably had the best career, you
Yeah,
know?
there's definitely qualifiers there that we won't get into of things he's avoided
Uh-huh.
in his life, but yeah, he's doing okay when you compare it to the next 20 years of a lot of post Superman actors.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing we're not saying because we don't cover Streamo, huh, is he had The
Huh.
Witcher on Netflix, which was a hit in the way that whatever Netflix shows could be hits.
Mhm.
And he did forego continuing on that show to go back to movies. So whatever we say about the box office of Henry Cavill and the non-existent drawing power he did decide I want to be in movies again. So we have to
Which
always
is
give him credit for that.
yes, that is the right decision. The morally correct decision to make.
Yes, exactly. If nothing else, he is morally correct in that he
Mhm.
chose movie stardom over streamo safety. So good for Henry Cavill there.
So I think the story of this weekend is just underperforming. The story of this weekend is the newbies nobody really wanted to see. Even Crunchyroll didn't do anything huge. I mean, it's still money in the pocket of theatrical, so put these Crunchyroll,
So Spy X Family Code: White did
the
4.8, which I
collab.
mean, these Crunchyroll movies, I mean, that is a collab. So we've been hyping, post Godzilla X Kong, the collab. We've been hyping bringing the X into your movies. And of course, Deadpool X Wolverine, that
Collab should be the
got to
collab.
be a collab, got to be an X in there. But Crunchyroll used the X, and I do think Crunchyroll uses the X frequently. They use a lot of things in movie titles that most movies don't use, multiple
Yeah, yeah.
colons,
Mhm.
X's, but the X didn't push it over the top this
Mm-mm.
weekend. I won't say this is a black mark for the X uh this weekend, but the X didn't elevate the way it elevated the collab.
I think it's what you said is that these Crunchyroll films are very niche still, and most of the country doesn't know that this came out, and so this does not put a black mark on the collab because the Kong versus Godzilla, or I'm sorry, the Kong X Godzilla
Collab,
collab
yeah.
is one of the first mainstream collab movies.
Mhm.
So that is it's still strong. When you put a mainstream movie, if it was Dracula X Daughter, the
Yeah,
collab, then you see a bump. Then we're talking this beats Civil War and it's the number one movie just because you're seeing Dracula and his daughter in a collab. That's
right.
huge.
That would have been huge. Yeah,
This is all, and no offense to Crunchyroll fans, but like they do have titles that to a theater goer who's say in their like 40s or 50s or even maybe even late 30s is incomprehensible if they haven't seen the anime. So
right.
that I don't think you can blame the X for this.
Yeah, they're not even getting to the X, a lot of these
No.
mainstream audiences. Here, and this is just gonna be a complete left turn here. I'm gonna throw this out as a what if. So this is back in the day, back in early 2000s, Strokes are ruling the top of the charts, in this day,
That never happened.
2002, a movie came out called Ballistic, uh, X versus Sever, and that movie opened to $7 million in September of 2022. If that movie had been called Ballistic XX Sever, does that movie do significantly better at the box office, or would that have been way too early for the collab phenomenon? 2002,
Well, yeah,
22
because
years
nobody
ago.
I mean, if we're talking, like, accuracy, that wasn't a thing back then,
Mm,
or as well known of a thing. I mean, maybe it existed, very underground. But
right.
also,
In the zine space, yeah.
it would have been misleading because that was a Versus movie.
It was a
Uh,
filmed as a
yeah.
versus, yeah.
Yeah, it was filmed as a Versus, so I don't think that you could put the X and say, "This is a collab," and then all of a sudden they're fighting each other the whole movie. Now,
Right.
listen, I'm gonna admit, I haven't seen that movie. It's a famous bomb. It had, the stink of a bomb from inception. I remember this movie coming out and the reception of it and the lead up to it that this was gonna be a stinker.
Yeah.
So, I haven't seen if they get together at the end, but if it's mostly them versus each other, then saying it's a collab would be wrong. Although in that Godzilla, X Kong, they do fight, right?
I'm sure they slap it out, the way that the superheroes, had their little slap fight uh, Captain America Civil War.
Yeah, and then they say we're gonna agree to be on the same team. So that I'm sure there is some sort of fight between them, but it's mostly about them collabing.
Yeah, that's true. So XX Sever wouldn't have changed things at the box office. If anything, it would have maybe ruined the whole notion of collab 22 years before Godzilla and Kong were able to use it effectively. So
Mhm.
good thing X versus Sever wasn't XX Sever in 2002. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the rest of his box office, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is where we thought it was, which was, crawling to like 110 million. And it's going to end up, as we've talked about, in that weird result zone where it looks like a hit, but is it enough of a hit to green light the squeakquel, the threequel in this franchise? And I don't think it is holding fine. Like, I mean, it only dropped 24%, but it's still going to end up in that zone where who knows what to do with this franchise anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
nothing
don't think
else
there's a
really standing out. Monkey Man
no.
is up to 21.6, and that's a movie that I feel like is undercut by the hype it had going into it, because people were pegging this as like a giant breakout movie based on the initial like first looks at it and a couple of months ago, and 21 million at this point, and it'll eventually get to probably almost 30, should be considered a huge success for that movie that was almost dumped on Netflix. But it almost feels like it didn't meet the hype that it had 3 months ago, even though if you just sit down and look at what this movie is and what it's going to end up making, it is a success.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the thing too is that, you know, the movie of the moment is not Monkey Man, it's Sniffle War, and I think that is the case, right? Like, Monkey Man came out, it did fine, we thought it could build, but the movie that people went to see was Sniffle War,
Right, right.
you know?
Yeah, and it is. Listen, and I'll eat crow in the sense that I will say its title. And Civil War is up to 44.8 million. It looks like now it's on a trajectory to do over 60. Um, for 824. And listen, in the end, we always win when even a movie we predict to not do well does well. Because
Mhm.
we're happy that 824 put its money where its mouth is, funded a $50 million budgeted movie, which we've always said, I've been saying for weeks and weeks, this movie was budgeted $50 million. And they're coming out with a success, not a slam bang. This movie's going to do double its budget domestically run, but I think they're happy with where this is going. And that's great for box office that now A24 is going to be a player in making higher budgeted movies where the expectation is they will do bigger numbers for movie theaters. So this is overall a great story that Civil War is overperforming. It's a bad story for America that audiences are so bloodthirsty to see the half that they don't agree with get destroyed on screen, but it's good for theaters.
I love that.
He loves that. He loves that, which is great. We love when things do well at the box office, whether we predict it or not.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I don't see anything else huge
Pat,
here.
no,
And yeah,
let's get out of here.
let's get out of here. Okay, great. So, if you want more of us, email us. Email us, theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. We love getting your emails. We have a backlog of
We
emails
have
that
a
we got to get
backlog.
to. And we got a backlog too. We got Donald Logue is in the back.
Mhm.
He's trying to get on the show. And eventually we'll get him on too. So we do have a backlog. So hopefully on maybe our weekend preview episode, we'll get to the emails, we'll get to Donald Logue, we'll clear up this backlog. But
Mhm.
send us your emails to boboyspodcast@gmail.com. We're gonna have to do a mailbag heavy episode in the next few days because we have such a backlog that we've
Uh-huh.
got to get through. And you know what? We'll get to this on that episode. We got some Apple reviews that we're going to talk
Yeah,
about. So
yeah.
give us your 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. We love reading those. And yeah, we got some of those we're going to read, and they are it's a doozy coming up. So boboyspodcast@gmail.com. Watch us on YouTube. We are YouTubers. Hey guys,
Hey, guys.
we are YouTubers. You could be watching this very show on the BO Boys YouTube channel. The Kirk exclusives, we had to take a week off, but we'll be getting back to that on the Kirk Minahan YouTube network. So go also subscribe over there. Watch us on social media. Wannabe O senior intern Christopher doing a bang up job with the clips at the BO Boys Pod on Twitter X and TikTok. And man, TikTok, we're taking off. So I think we just got to drop maybe some music from the new Taylor Swift album on some TikTok videos, and then it's to the moon for at the BO Boys Pod on TikTok. So want to be our senior intern Christopher, he's listening. I think it's time to get some Taylor Swift over
I'd
some
rather
of our
die.
clips. And of course, Wannabe junior intern Jack killing it on the Substack, just writing up a storm. This guy is gonna be he's a man of letters, and we're lucky to have him so early in his writing career. So subscribe to the BO Boys Substack link below. And like I said, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And yeah, Clayton, there's nothing left to say. Not
I
left
know,
to
we're
say.
on no other platforms, and there's nothing left to say
Nothing left to say.
except for until next time, we'll
Will smell
smell
you
you
Office.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.